Thanks for checking out another testimony here. We have our friends Ken and Cheryl, and thank you guys for being with us today to share your story. We'll just go ahead and get started. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
So we'll bounce around a little bit, but why don't we just start at the beginning? How did the two of you meet, and what's the trajectory towards Jesus in there?
We met when we were
in seventh grade.
Wow.
And actually we were in gym class and they had dancing in there, square dancing and I met her and I really liked her, but I didn't talk to her because I didn't talk much when I was in school. And one of her girlfriends come back to me and said, Cheryl really likes you, but she thinks you're too short. And so I didn't go buy elevated shoes or anything, but I just, and we became, well, you can tell your part.
We became friends, and then we became friends. I mean, we started, I know
and
it
that was in
sounds silly when
February.
you're that young.
Yeah.
But it had to be God, because he knew what my life was like, and he knew I was protected. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there was a protection there. I went from my parents that protected me from everything. And he was gracious enough to watch over, to make sure I didn't.
And to have a timestamp, it was February of 1964. There is a 1964 back there. But that was when we were in gym class. And then after that, she always had a birthday party, and it was the first birthday party that I ever went to at her house, and she was going to be 13. And so I'd known her for April 4th was her birthday. And so I decided I was going to ask her to go steady with me. So I bought her an adjustable ring.
That's good.
So at that party, I asked her to go steady with me, and she did.
We did. We've been together ever since.
I love the phrase "go steady."
Yeah.
So for this generation these days, explain what is that? What does that mean that you asked her to go steady?
For us, to me, it was, I had a best friend, and she was my best friend, and continued to be my best friend. And
we just didn't think about seeing anyone else.
Right.
That was it. We just wanted to be together.
And as we
all the
were
time.
in, I lived a little ways from her, but my mother would always go get groceries in the town where she was. So they dropped me off at her house, and her mom and dad were older, but they were good
Sweet
to me.
people.
But we talk on the phone. That's back when there was no cell phone, party lines.
Did it cost money long distance to talk?
Yeah.
Or?
Yes.
Well, we weren't long distance. But
Okay.
It did cost long.
Okay.
if
So
were
you
long
talked on
distance.
the party line.
Yeah.
You just pick up and you go,
Yeah.
"Hey, are you there?"
And-
Or what do you do? What's
No,
that?
I call it, but you
Okay.
have to wait until you'd pick it up and there'd be somebody talking. So you'd hang it down, wait a little longer, pick it up, and then
You had to be
finally I get to
courteous.
call. And of course, my mother would always remind me that it's a party line. You can't talk too long. But we went to the same school. We were in the same homeroom, in fact, because they went by, my name began with a C, hers, Beeman was with a B. And so we spent a lot of times at lunch
All the time together.
And in fact, she hates this, but we wrote letters back and forth while we were in school because we were in different classes, and mine ended up getting lost. But I have 2 boxes this big with all of her
That I
the
had
notes
written.
that she wrote,
Mine got
and
lost in a flood.
they were they were, as I look at my lap, because they were kind of silly things like, I don't like this teacher. Or I'll meet you in front of the locker or something. I mean, but And she had nice handwriting. I had terrible handwriting. But,
I love that.
It was
So
good.
you were telling me the other day some other interesting things. So you guys had started dating, and then tell us a little bit about your dad, because your dad has a little bit of an interesting story, and you experienced some loss at a young age.
yes, yeah. When I was, my dad he did a lot of different things. He was a welder, he was built houses, did a lot of different things. But when I was just after I turned 16, just turned 16, I knew that he had been sick and he was going to the hospital all the time. And he was very active, so it was really hard for him. And he was losing weight, and so I knew that something was going on. My brother took me for a ride. He was 4 years older than me, and we drove down and just parked beside the road. And he said, "Your dad has 6 months to live." And so that didn't register. I just thought, no, at that point, I'd never had anybody in my life pass away.
Right.
I mean, it was like even grandparents were still alive. Mm-hmm. And so that actually had to be in June or before June. No, it had to be like in April that he told me that. And so anyway, as time progressed, the one thing I really liked is he got to meet Cheryl, and he really, really liked Cheryl. I mean, he really did. And so he always told me, he'd say, make sure you take care of her. And so anyway, he eventually, I come home one night, and it had been almost 6 months, and there was cars in the yard. I think you had dropped me off. Or was your mother driving? I don't know. But anyhow, so I'm thinking, what's going on? And I still hadn't put that really together. And I got up, and my uncles and aunts were there, and my mother gets me and says that my dad had passed away. Mm. And so I was kind of numb from it. I mean, I didn't know. And of course, Cheryl was there for me, and her mom and dad were. And so it was a difficult time.
Yeah.
And when you're 16, you don't really think it's really going to happen. And I mean, you just think that it's a fairy tale. It's not really going to happen.
And I couldn't process it really good. And that was in October, and I played sports in school, but I decided that I wanted to help my mom. So I got a job at a meat market near where she lived, and worked for a while. And then my mother told me, says, "You don't have to do that." And I went back, got involved in wrestling, which was probably my favorite sport. And then we went through high school. We never broke up. I got in trouble once, and I will confess this. I can't even remember what I did, but we were supposed to go to a dance together, and I can't remember what I'd done wrong, but I'd done something, and my father told me, "You're not going to go tonight. You were supposed to do this or that," and that crushed me. I remember thinking, no, I can't, and
Can't believe you remember stuff like that.
but
so when you asked her to go steady, you guys just are still going steady, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
All these years later.
I know it was only God. I mean, it could only be God, because a lot of things have happened. And when I don't know. I just know that if it weren't for the Lord, we may still be together, but not in love together. I mean, does that make any sense?
Yeah, for sure.
So I know that.
The joy that you two have.
Yeah, it has to be. And boy, what he has brought us through. I know people would go, "Oh, yeah, right. Things really did happen, and they were not good.
Yeah.
And things really did happen, and they were really good."
when we were in about 11th grade, I remember what was Miss Pasto? She was a sociology teacher. She comes up and she grabs us and she goes, "This isn't going to last."
Oh.
And I didn't say anything. I just said, and then at our 10-year reunion, she come up and said, okay, so it
I was
lasted. And
That's good.
That's great. Now, where was your hometown? What town and state?
it was upstate New York, which was north of Syracuse, in a little town called Chittenango.
Chittenango, New York. It's where their claim to fame is
Frank Baum.
Frank Baum. He wrote The Wizard of Oz.
He was born there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
How about that?
That's great.
and it's a very small town. In fact, the other day I looked it up and I was thinking back about that was a pretty big town. I'm thinking there probably was 18,000 people. So I looked it up. Even today, it showed there was like 2,800 people. And I'm going, wow.
That's a small town.
So how old were you when you got married?
18.
18 years old.
Just
And
turned.
you know, you're no real relationship or understanding about who God is at this
And
point.
at that point, no.
Nope.
Yeah.
I never was brought up. You can tell
My
your
mom
story
and dad
about
went to
being
church.
Okay.
and what happened when you went to church. So
Yeah. They were not nice people. No, my mom and dad were now they call them custodians, but at that time they were janitors, you know.
Okay.
Both of them. And so the people where we went to church always looked down on them. They always said things about them, and you know they would talk about them. And I was sitting right behind them. I'm like, you don't even know my parents, because my parents helped so many people, and they didn't have a lot of money, but they were always there for everybody, you know. So it kind of gave me a bad taste for church because they just, why would you talk about people like that? You don't even know them, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy for people to forget that that the church is made up of humans,
Right.
you know,
Right.
and our humanity doesn't shed off when we walk through the door. And so church as a whole is imperfect. And if it was meant to be perfect, I say all the time, you know, then God wouldn't have put man in charge of it, you know. So God's
they
fully
messed it
well,
up. Yeah.
fully aware that we were going to make mistakes. But yeah, that's a common story. Probably people watching this right now who would say, you know, yeah, I had a bad experience in church.
And I was a kid, so it was worse.
Yeah,
I mean, when you're an adult, you can kind of go, well, you know,
Yeah.
Lord, I need to pray for them. But
So from turning 18, then getting married, where do you go from there in your story to Christ?
all right.
we were 23.
From there,
We were 23.
23 years old, and everything seemed to be going well. But there was a time when, after we had our first child, for God, I remember thinking, and maybe it was because we hadn't had James yet. And so I thought, you know what, I got to do something different because, you know, I'm going to have a child. I want to be. So I thought, and her cousin was going to a church. I don't know what church it was, but he said, why don't you have the pastor? I'll have him come down and talk to you. So I thought, okay, I'll dress up nice and I'll make sure I talk good and don't say something. And he came over, and it was strange because I had no one in my family that was churched, no one at that time. And so anyway, he comes in and I don't know what to say. So I just say, what do you believe? And I don't know if he actually said this, but what I heard was, you can't dance, you can't drink, you can't smoke, you can't do. He had all this rules, and I got all done. And you can ask her what I said. I'm going, shut the door, bar it, and don't ever let him in again. And so
You're like, I met my wife in line dancing class. Don't tell me I can't dance.
Exactly.
And so it wasn't shortly after that, through a chain of events. I wasn't working I had a small motorcycle shop at my house, but me and a buddy of mine that raced together, we took a job that was quite far away, probably an hour drive, and to go to work there. And he had already trained as a welder. So we went, and we were there 2 days. And And he calls me that night and says, I got a job, so I can't ride with you anymore. It's right next to me. So I said, well, I guess I'm going to be going by myself. So I go in and we were on one of the picking parts, and it was a two-man forklift cage, and then you just roll down, you go up and pick parts. One guy write it down, no computer stuff then. And so I got on there with this guy. They had long hair and a beard, young guy, jean jacket. I thought, this is going to be cool. We can party together or whatever. And so we just continued. We talked. He'd talk about things. And I knew that he knew something about God, but I could only tell her, I don't know what he is. But and he was very consistent with me, and he'd say, hey, this is see this in the newspaper? The Bible talks about that. I go, really? And so as time went on, probably about 3 or 4 weeks, he said, can I give you a book your wife mind? I said, no, what is it? And he said, Late Great Planet Earth. So I took that book home and I read it, and it was like, I'm going, I know who them Pharisee guys are. but I read through it, and the things that's, I got done with it, and we talked some more, and then he said, would your wife mind if I gave you a little New Testament here? So I said, no. I said, she'll like it. She's the good one. But and so I went home and began to read it, and of course he had me start in John, and just time progressed, and I can remember the one day I went in, I read through the book of John a couple times, and I said, I don't know what words I used, but I was asking him, how can I know that I'm saved? And he said, go home, read the Bible, pray, and just seek the Lord. Mm-hmm. And didn't give me any other information, so I went home and I did it. I come back and said, nothing. So he's going, and he talked a little more, but then he said, go home again. 3 times. On the 3rd time, and I'd like to say it was some bright light. No, it was just that all I can think of was when I read the scripture where it said that he asked Peter, who am I? And Peter told him, and he said, it wasn't flesh and blood that it was revealed to you. It was God that revealed himself to you. And that's kind of what it was. It was just all of a sudden I said, oh, I get it. Mm-hmm. And through that, he began to disciple me. Mm-hmm. And then through, which I don't know how much you want me to tell.
No, this is your story, not ours. We're listening.
Good.
Yeah.
So what had happened, and we been involved in motorcycle racing. All my kids know all this story, so it's no
we
big deal to
never
them.
lied to our kids.
But we ended up, we were in, the drug scene and whatnot, and we'd party at our house and whatnot. So anyhow, before I came to know the Lord, it was like a month before, our buddy, 3 of us got together and said, let's get some marijuana. And so they knew some guy in New Mexico. And so I said, that sounds good. So we all went together on that. But they didn't tell me they were going to ship it to my little shop at my house. So anyhow, so what happens is now, that happened a month ago. All of a sudden now, I come to know the Lord, and I call him, and I say, and it was a good chance for me to witness them, say, look, and all I knew then was I found Jesus, and everything's changed, so stop it. I don't want, make sure that gets stopped. And so I'm thinking, cool, everything is good. And so I'm still working far away, no cell phones, and all of a sudden I get called to the foreman's office and says, your wife wants to talk to you. She says it's important. And she comes and I get there and she says, hey, the UPS man brought a package today, but it wasn't the UPS man. It was a detective. And so,
This is life in prison, okay, at this point.
I mean, back then it was a big deal. Now
Yeah.
they just do
Yeah.
whatever. But anyhow, so I'm like very nervous.
Yeah.
And she says, they're going to be here when you get home. So I'm on the way home, I stopped at a payphone and called my buddies and told them, I said, look, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm just going to tell them the truth of what happened. And so I'm going to tell him who's involved. And he was good. He says, that's fine. No problem. So I get home and she's calm. She's pregnant.
I don't
for
know.
her
There
second
was,
child.
and I had not done anything. I was not
And-
doing anything. But
and so-
God gave me such a peace. I didn't even. It was like, we're good. I mean,
Wow.
it's
He had
good.
supper ready for me, and I'm going, I can't eat. and the detectives come in and said, "I want you to follow us down." And so we followed them down, and I'm thinking, man, I've never got anywhere near to close to jail. So they sat across. It was kind of like a table like this.
Yeah.
Sat across and asked us, "Do you know anybody that does drugs?" I said, "Be better if you asked me, do I know anybody that doesn't?" So then they asked me about
They did.
the stuff that it came in, and I said, "Well," and I told them the story. I said, "Look, we had got together to get this and ship it here." And then I came to the part where I looked at them and they said, "Well, what happened after that?" I said, "Well, I found Jesus." And they both laughed. I mean, they physically laughed out loud. And then I told them who it was, who was involved, and everything that had happened. And I thought, I don't know what's going to happen from here, but it's up to God. And so and at this time, it looked like a terrible thing was going to happen. I mean, like, uh-oh, I'm going to get saved. I hope I know somebody in jailhouse ministry. But anyhow, we went back home and they said they'd contact us. And so it was the first thing I did is I called all my friends and told them, do not come to our house because they will stop you and whatnot.
Tear everything
And
apart.
the young man that had led me to the Lord, he began coming down and helping to disciple me and find a church for us and whatnot. And everybody else stayed away.
That's
Wow.
what really helped because we didn't have any of that outside.
Yeah.
Influence. Nobody was, it was like everybody stayed away.
Yeah.
That's great.
And
Yeah.
it was, and it worked out. We had some really great times together. And so shortly after we got saved, shortly after that happened, I went down to my cousin's house, who we used to party with, him and his wife. So we went down to tell him that we're not doing it anymore because we got Jesus now. And I looked at my cousin, I said, look, we got Jesus and we're just not doing that anymore. And I'm sorry if we got you into this or whatever, but so he's like rolling his eyes and stuff. And we look at his wife and she looks at us and says, I got this little New Testament's all I got. And she says, that's what I've been looking for.
Wow.
And I'm looking, she said, can I have it? I said, sure. And
Wow.
so gave it to her on the way home. I'm going, that was easy.
Yeah.
And I'm going,
We
I
can
didn't
tell
know
everybody
anything.
about
If she would have
Jesus.
said, can you explain the way of salvation? I would
Right.
have gone, I don't know, just reading.
Yeah.
And but then again, this was during the Jesus Revolution, which I didn't know that at the time.
You didn't know you were right in the middle of a spiritual awakening.
No, I had
Until
no
2024
idea.
when they made a movie.
Exactly. Yes.
I was there. I saw that.
That's amazing. This is such an interesting story. And I can't pass up the fact that you said you stopped on the way home to use a payphone to call your friends. Because that's my childhood too. Like, I remember payphones. And I
Yeah.
just feel like people today may not appreciate that.
Because you
Dial.
don't think
Yeah.
To dial it.
Yeah.
you can't get a hold of some. I mean, it wasn't
If
there.
you don't have
It
a
was
quarter or a dime, like
Yeah.
there's no phone call to be made, you know?
That's right.
So how did you convince her to?
I think God had already prepared her heart because she never swore. She was the good part. And she just was. And the biggest thing I loved about her, and it was more and more as we grew, she loved her mother and father so much.
Aw.
That I'm not afraid of them. I know this is how I came to think about how God was. She loved him so much, she didn't want to do anything that would hurt them. And of course, they were older. And
They were old.
so, and her dad was born in 1894 and her mom was born in 1904.
Wow.
And so, and they were great. They were great people.
And my father, he loved Billy Graham. So that was like, sit down, we're watching.
Wow.
Okay, we're watching.
That's amazing. Wow.
So, yeah, go ahead.
But I didn't really know. I mean, I didn't have the concept of who Jesus was. I mean, but my mom always said to me, I must have been a newborn, and she started saying, God sees everything.
What a good message.
Yep, and I remember that. God saw everything.
Oh, that's great.
And from there, you're the one that usually talks, so
I
you
know,
should
let
be
you talk.
talking. But from there, yeah, I was so happy to have John, the guy that led me to the Lord, that he was there, and he knew the word, and he was only a year younger than me or something.
That's good.
And in that warehouse there was like 18 guys, and I want to say 13 or 14 of them came to know the Lord.
Wow,
And,
that's awesome.
And
I'm so grateful for technology like this where people can watch at their convenience the podcast. I'm so grateful for like the YouVersion app and all that. And so I'm thankful for those tools, but I really don't want us to lose touch with the one-on-one discipleship that you're talking about.
Right.
That was so, I mean, that's how it was done, in your, back when you got saved, in your younger years.
Right.
And so even I think that we should view all of these things as added bonuses, but not ever lose touch with the one-on-one mentorship, discipleship. Like, it's so powerful. It's so meaningful.
it was so incredible because I knew little or nothing about the Bible. Of course, we used to sit around before we got saved and say, well, 12 guys wrote this thing, so we don't go too crazy. But the guy that discipled me, it was just, I would ask him things like,
Should I quit
I was
racing
racing
motorcycles?
motorcycles on Sunday. So I told him, I said, I was thinking, what I was thinking in my mind was, well, I could win all these people to the Lord if I was there on Sunday. And so instead of him saying, no, you need to be, he just said, ask God. And it would have been so much easier if he would have just said,
Oh, yeah.
Go to church. But
Yeah.
and there were several other things that he would say, you got to talk to God about it. Read the word, talk to God. And
So you guys get saved, lives changed, and you're still in New York
Yep.
at this point. But then you guys like begin to make some major changes. You're fostering kids. You're moving across states. I mean, obviously you're living in South Carolina, attending a church in Georgia right now. Tell us, like, just kind of sum it up, summarize it up.
Condense it.
But before we left New York, we adopted 3 children within
In my
14,
favorite
15
book
months.
Wow.
Okay, let me ask you a question on that, because I hear y'all say this, and I thought about this after the other day. Do you that burden to adopt, to take kids in, did that come through your relationship with Christ?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. To have kids was not, because we talked about when we were growing up, you had
Because I was adopted, it was important
and,
to.
and we would take
Okay.
Ronnie, your cousin's kids that were real little, and we'd take them places when we were 16 and whatnot. And we
But
always
the
said
Lord
that.
led.
But
all
it
of
did change when the book of James was one of my favorite books, because I remember reading where it said true religion is to take care of the widows and orphans. And And that just was big to me. And so that's when we started that. So that was in New York. And we did,
Then
we adopted one and didn't really plan on adopting another right away. But it was
6 months.
6 months later, they said, there's a young man that needs a home and they're going to
8.
adopt all his sisters. But would you take them? And so we said, yeah. And they said, we're going to keep them in touch with his sisters. I said, that's good. And he was a black young man. I mean, kid. He was 8 years old.
Yep.
Oh.
And they brought him to our house with a paper bag
Grocery
of
bag.
clothes.
Wow.
And usually there's a time where they drop them off for a day, then they pick them up, and then maybe come back overnight. But this one was just, we need him,
Straight to it.
and he's there. So, and what I didn't really know at the time, that he was from a black community, and he was the only boy out of like 5
Girls.
I think 5 sisters that he had.
Wow.
And so,
And he did not know any white people. So I think that the social services was really not telling us, because we had no idea. Because, I mean, I know this sounds really stupid when I say this, because when we lived in Oklahoma, we had Native Americans, but I never looked out and said, well, that child's black, that child's Indian. I just didn't, it didn't appear to me. Even when I was with Andreza, she said to me, well, my brown skin. And I looked in and I thought, I never noticed. You know, I mean, it just, I mean, I know that sounds, well, but anyhow.
No, you just.
So then we have our boys. Now we have 4 boys, and we were looking for a little girl to adopt. So we were going through social services. And the little girl we were looking at, she was deaf, and another couple came along that didn't have any children. And because she was only 3, it was more likely that she would be adopted because she was 3 and not 13, you know? And so then we didn't get her because the other couple came across. But then when we went to church, another lady came and said, would you come to our house and talk to my daughter? And her daughter was 23. She wasn't a little kid. And we get there. We don't know why. Okay, we have no idea why.
Come talk to her.
So we get in there, and her daughter, Debbie, we've met Debbie maybe 2 or 3 times. And she said, I'm 4 months pregnant. Would you adopt my baby?
Wow.
And I went to him. I said, this is our girl. It's our girl. I know it is, you know. I know that God just gave me that. Longest pregnancy I've ever experienced.
I feel like, though, that people who adopt, the plans go out the window. You know what I mean? Because it's like, sure, you can think about what you want and what you think will happen, but the timeline is all over the place. And so you just have to, I think that's why it's like the desire births in your heart. That's what, like, you describing what you just said. I'm like, you see with your heart, like the Lord has really given you compassion for children and for people in general. But, you know, for you knew that you wanted to adopt, you know, both of y'all. And so as families who adopt, from what I understand, it's like they may have this picture perfect, like we'll do this and that, and it's like no, all the plans, just throw them out.
And it took me a while to realize that these children are broken.
Yeah.
I mean, I was broken from my father passed away, but these are, and it is a difficult situation, but it's also. It's so rewarding, and
It is. Not that there are a lot of heartbreaks when you see what our 4 kids, because they were 4, 5, 6, and 7, when we went to see his cousin Kathy, and she said, would you take my kids? And we weren't prepared to take the kids because we thought that I thought God was going to heal her, and maybe she would come and live with us, you know. But
my mother had called us and told us. Now, this is after we moved
We're
to
in Oklahoma.
Just moved to Oklahoma, and said that, which both of us knew my cousin.
Kathy.
She was 2 years younger, and she had leukemia. And so my mother said she's not doing very well. So we decided we call her and ask her, what can we do for
And do you know Jesus?
And
was-
and so we called her, and she gave us her testimony. She came to know the Lord. She had a terrible husband that had done some awful things to her, and he was nowhere to be found. And then the next thing out of her mouth, will you take my 4 children?
Wow.
And so,
We prayed about it.
we did. We did, and we said, well, we'll see what we can do. We were really hoping that something would happen, and she would maybe be able to come down and stay with us in Oklahoma. But so anyhow, we went through that, and she seemed like she was getting a little better. We called. We're going back up to New York to visit this time with no
Emergencies.
other emergency or anything. And by the time we got there, she was in not very good shape. But Cheryl had already been to the judge a couple months before that and signed all the paperwork that we would take him if she needed us to. So that was all done. And when we got there, she said, would you please take the children? And that was very heart-wrenching to do. To walk in and it was heart-wrenching for her, for what I felt for her. But during this time, before that, we called some people that were in the little church that we used to belong to in New York. We said, would you go over and encourage her? Just go over and, pray with her, encourage her. And they said, yeah, we'll go ahead and do it. So they went, and then they called us back, and I said, well, how'd it go? It said, well, we didn't really need to encourage her because we came out of there encouraged.
That's good.
Wow.
Yeah,
She
loved
knew
the Lord.
and she knew what was happening.
That's good.
So you guys had 4 kids, and then you grew by 4 more kids. Is that what it was?
Well, we
to
had
make your 8?
5 kids at that point.
Oh, okay.
And then we had 4.
Brought 4
more.
back home.
So how many did you have in the house at one time?
9.
8.
Well, we had 9 at one time.
At one time.
And then
Yeah.
the oldest one, he went out.
But
on
now,
his own.
just to make sure everybody realizes, Sam, who we adopted, he was 13, 12.
12 or 13.
And so he was with us only till he was about 16. We kept in contact with him, but he was very streetwise, but he's a nice kid. Nicest kid you would, polite and very, very good kid. And nobody ever thought he would do anything wrong. And this is just a little thing it's not funny, but it was funny how people believe it. Anyhow, we had a neighbor that had a son that was good friends with Sam. And so they had shared his dirt bike. So one day, we get a call from
The kid's mother.
Kid's mother had the dirt bike and said, a kid just took the dirt bike out of our yard, and it looks like Sam, but I don't believe it can't be Sam. I know Sam, and it's not Sam.
Yeah.
So we said, okay. And the next thing you know, things go on, and the police come and ask us, no, they were mad when they came because they stopped Sam on these railroad tracks where they rode, and Sammy could really talk his way out of anything. And they said, have you seen the kid on the bike? Blah, blah. He said, yeah, he went that way. And they knew him because it was a small town. They said, okay. Then they realized when he took off that it was him. And so they came to our house looking for him. And he didn't get very much trouble for it. But
wow,
he was streetwise.
What was the range of age? Like, what was the youngest child and the oldest child in the house at the same time?
Okay, they were 9 months to 9 years old. Okay. 8 of them.
9 months to 9 years old.
And
8 of them.
3 of them, and then Sam was older, but there's 3 of them that are the same age for 2 months.
Wow.
So we had 3 16-year-olds at the same time.
Wow.
Driving. Yeah,
That's
it was
crazy.
fun. No, it was fun. It was so much
I had my own
fun.
baseball team.
It was so much fun. And we just had so much fun.
That's amazing. That's how I know that the Lord puts it in your heart to adopt, because you describing it as being fun. Like, when you are following what the Lord has put in your heart, it is very fulfilling and rewarding. And So praise God for people who have the heart to adopt.
And
you
not
know.
that we didn't go through some really hard times,
Right.
and that I didn't get upset with my kids, and that they did everything right. But it was, I mean, God just had things that when we did things, it was just fun. I mean, it was fun.
Yeah.
All their sports, and we always had meals together. That's the one thing we were talking about, having a meal together. We always had, I mean, other than sports, we had to go to sports, but we would sit down to a meal, and we'd all talk about what our day was, and talk about, what was going on. And there's a real connection there.
That's amazing.
And I don't think people, because their friends didn't have that.
Yeah.
Do you always sit down at the table to eat? My kids went, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you guys ever get all of them together now?
Is
Not now. How many are?
okay. We have one that's in Texas, and then one in South Carolina. So we see him, 3 in upstate New York, and the rest are in Georgia.
Wow.
Okay.
So
And how? Sam,
Reggie, and
Leon.
no, okay, Sam,
That are
Reggie.
50.
Oh, yeah. We have one that's 60, and then we have 5 that are 50 in their 50s.
Yeah,
That's scary.
Wow.
the one, Sam, who's the oldest one we adopted, he still kept in touch with us. And he calls this probably several months ago, and he goes, "Do you know what? You're only 13 years
He's
older
older.
than I am."
Wow.
And I said, "You're absolutely
Right.
right."
Wow.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
Yeah, because it's you and Corey.
Yeah, because we were very
And
similar.
It is hard sometimes to. I mean, I get really. I miss our grandbabies because that's what would bring. The grandbabies would come and the
Right.
parents would come.
Yeah.
And I do miss that.
And
but-
we did for a long time when we were in Georgia. We would be any of the kids were close at all on Thanksgiving. We would meet Thanksgiving for the weekend, and then our
Do
son
Christmas.
lived on Hilton Head. He would come. They'd go get a bouncy house for all the grandbabies,
Wow.
and so we'd spend. And then they'd usually bring somebody with them.
Yeah,
and then we
always had
celebrate
extras.
Christmas and Thanksgiving together because they all had in-laws and stuff.
Yeah.
So that was a real fun time.
I like to making it easier for my children. I don't want to say, "Oh, you have to be here at Christmas."
Right.
No, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
And the one other thing, I hate to even say this, but Cheryl's mom was with us when we went to Oklahoma, which it was good.
Bless her heart.
But
She was a
in
trooper.
She was in her 80s by then.
Yeah, she had to be about 80.
Near 80 anyhow. But
She slept in the van while we slept we were at a campground for
Wow.
almost a month looking for a place to live.
Oh my goodness, that's
And
amazing.
my mom slept in the van. She was so precious. She just went with whatever we did.
That's
she went,
so sweet.
She was a good lady.
some of the things that we moved to Oklahoma originally because of motorcycles. So I thought I'd have a better chance of more steady work and the weather would be better.
And it was.
So we ended up, we're going to go to New Mexico, but we realized there's not a lot in New Mexico. But we did. One of the things in the Oklahoma years were still exciting
They were.
for us. And but we're staying at a KOA campground. And so we're getting ready to, well, I'll back up just a little bit. There was a family before we left New York. I used to cut wood and deliver it. And I met this family. There was, they had 5 children.
kids and him and her.
they're on social services. And so me and a friend of mine, your cousin Danny, I got talking to him when I delivered the wood, and then later we invited him to church, and then Danny and I went up and prayed for him. The mom and dad got saved, but they were on welfare, and it was very hard. I tried to get him a job where I was working at the motorcycle shop, and he come back and he goes, "I can't survive on I'll lose the help
Social
that I get.
services.
So they asked us if they could follow us to
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. And so that's where we had an old Volkswagen bus and it had a blown motor. So I told them, I said, look, if you want to put a motor in it and follow us, that's great.
Wow.
So, and this is
That's
what-
my dream car, by the way. A
Is it
VW
really?
bus. Yes, it's my dream car.
Yes.
and
Fun
so
fact.
anyway, they ended up.
She dreams about it because they all have blown motors.
He will not get one for me.
Yeah, I'm always like, we're not doing that. They break down all the time.
They both got jobs and did real. I mean,
Yeah,
they
got all-
really did
they got-
well.
they didn't didn't have any social services when they got there, when they got to Oklahoma. But
God
so-
blessed them.
Wow.
Blessed them. They came to know the Lord, and He blessed them.
That's amazing.
But the Oklahoma, staying in the campground,
Yeah.
I had a guitar. I met a woman in the
Laundry.
the laundromat when we were with Cheryl. Actually, we our first night in Oklahoma, I had no idea that thunderstorms were
Tornadoes.
like that.
Oh,
in upstate
yeah.
New York,
Didn't have a
we
clue.
didn't
That's a
get
whole new thing.
thunderstorms like
Yeah.
that.
Oh, that's funny.
So it's beautiful. I'm going, it's beautiful. Let's take all the luggage out and we'll redo it tomorrow morning. She wakes me up in the middle of the night in the tent going, there's water coming in here. It's thunder and lightning.
The ground was shaking.
Yeah.
So-
I mean, it was scary.
Serious.
So anyway, it ended up, we had to go to the laundromat. And these are things that I'll treasure in my heart forever. This is probably one of the dearest women that I ever made. She's an older woman and we're in the laundromat doing the laundry and she walks up to Cheryl, I think, and says, you're a Christian, aren't you? And Cheryl says, yeah. And you're filled with the Spirit, right? Yeah. And so then she starts talking to us and she says, I'd like to pray for you. So I'm kind of looking for a place to pray. And she just grabs hold of hands and
Right
starts
there in the middle of the
praying
room.
for
Wow.
us.
That's good.
It's his
amazing.
sweetheart.
And then we saw her later and she knew I had a guitar. So she says, I have an idea. There's a lot of
Young people.
kids that are going to be going to Rhema. But she says, I want to be able to, we'll start a campfire and get them all over and we'll sing and see if we can witness to
him.
some people and whatnot. And so we did it for about a week back and forth. And she was just, she was really on fire for the
She loved the Lord.
That's sweet.
That's good.
That's really so. You play the guitar, Mr. Ken?
Yes.
I feel like you guys are a wealth of
I'm not good,
just
but,
knowledge and stories and
Stories. We have stories.
I mean, you have so many stories of that, like organic, authentic moment when you meet people and the Lord is really working, and that your heart position is just ready for the daily things that the Lord calls us to do.
Sure.
Cheryl is one of these people. I'm not going out and introducing myself. I have to force myself to do that. So, but I would be, even when we were young, I'd be in the store and she'd be talking to somebody and I go, I don't know that. I said, who is that? She says, I don't know. I just was talking to him. And I'm like,
I love that.
and I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
But,
But you start talking, and as you talk to them, and you go, do you need prayer? Can we pray together? And it just opens up a hope. I mean, because you've already broke some of the, to get in there. So it works.
I do want to say a couple things before we
Sure.
get too far here. It is, and I will not try to get too emotional, but we got to South Carolina. Our son, we didn't have any means to be where we're at, but he helped us, and all of our kids, and they did better than I did. But anyhow, when we were getting ready to move down, and I said, well, I got to find a church. So, and if Ruben gets to listen to this, I hope he'll be blessed. But so we're driving down 278, and here's this church that says New Life. So I said, man, that looks like that might be a place that's not too far and whatnot. So we go down, drive past it while we're visiting. And so I go online, and I always joke because I said, his last name is Jesus. And so anyhow, we and once we got moved down, we went over and we just really clicked with them. And we really did. I will always love them. And it was just so excited to be back in, in church, with all the moving and whatnot. And we'd grown really, really close to them. And then COVID hits, and in between, Pastor Ruben had been over, and he was talking that he was going to be
Taking
taking
a year off.
due to many different things. And so I'm like, okay,
Now where do we go?
now what do we do? So it ended up that things happened, and so we ended up saying we need to find a different church because of the things that were happening at COVID and whatnot. And so anyhow, I can still remember you sitting on the couch, and Andressa had called Cheryl. She's just like
she was
Andressa's just
crying.
bubbling over.
It's so cool.
Ruben he'd already been here, I think, for almost a year.
Almost,
and
yeah.
And he's going a year to the date. He's back in ministry, and it's so funny
so excited.
because she's Ruben talked to me, said, you might consider going over there. And he said, no, you might not be used to the music.
That's
and
cute.
and
That's
I
cute.
kind of chuckled, and but so we said, yeah, Jade, who lived with us, but she was going to school. We were looking for something because we couldn't pick her up and bring her back and forth every day. So that worked out really good, and I'm so thankful for the community here that
We know it was God that,
And I want to warn people, there's been times in our life where we've been separated from the church due to different things. Nothing good happens during that time.
Sure.
Absolutely nothing. You might not go into any big thing, but you're not going forward.
Right.
You're not making any progress. You're going backwards.
That's good.
And and to be around, I never want to go to church just to check the box, to
Right.
go, okay.
Right.
And I'm not trying to do a big advertisement, but I'll tell you what, I met so many young people here that just bless my heart to see young people on fire for God.
they really do love the Lord.
And I treasure them.
Yeah.
And through TRP, I resisted. I didn't want to go. And after I went, I'm going, man, I could have missed so much.
Wow.
The
Yeah.
blessings.
And I've got to know these guys, and they're all growing.
And they love to talk about the Lord. We're not talking about football and basketball every time you see them. They love sharing about what God is doing in their lives. And
And that was
And
a
it's-
problem I used to have. I sometimes you can be at certain places and you mention God's name, even though you assume that you're around some godly people. They're like, hold it. And so, and I've never felt that.
Wow.
I never,
Good.
and when they come down, I mean,
Yeah.
it's
and we
good.
visited the house. It just was an awesome.
Well, you guys are a big blessing too.
Yes.
We hear that all the
Thank
time,
you.
and we really appreciate all that you guys bring to the table. So,
And by the testimony of what the Lord has done in your life, you
Yeah.
can see the investment into the next generation because you have walked that out.
Yep.
So you guys carry that passion in the way that you invest in the young people. So I think it's mutually beneficial that where you're saying that you're blessed by the young people who
Yep.
are on fire for the Lord. So many young people need to see a couple who have been married for so long as you guys have, who have raised a family, who have weathered the storms of life, that it's mutually beneficial for you guys to be here for the young people, and the way that you guys serve and give and love with endless energy.
yeah, these
Amazing.
you guys serve in kids ministry, and so y'all come in there, and I know Zoe just loves
Oh,
it
loves
when
it, yeah.
when you guys are in there
And
you're
on host team too.
yeah, and then on host team, and you do as a side project, you like to do some woodworking.
Yeah.
And so you've we've got a piece of art that you made that hanging in our house. I saw it yesterday and was thinking about you. And then you make little toys that the kids have. We've got a ping pong
The
ball
Bible
gun.
that you open it and there's fire
Catches on
inside
fire,
of it.
yeah, for,
all the
I
props.
was talking about that with Cheryl because she makes blankets for everybody.
Yes.
And I said, do you realize that child or that grown up, whoever it is, they're going to look at that later and say,
Yep.
you know, like what my grandmother, if my grandmother made me something
Yeah.
like that, it'd be like, oh, I
That's right.
remember.
Yeah.
her.
They're gonna remember
And,
Cheryl.
it's legacy for sure, and you guys are having that impact. And then you are coming on as an elder. We're in the process of wrapping that up, and we really are excited about that and the value that we
I'm very humble.
that we believe that you add. And we're looking forward to how the testimony continues, because I know you guys talk about the length of your testimony, right? But you hear me say this, but Moses was 80. And so, and God was
lots
just
of
getting
life
started.
ahead.
So as long as as long as you've got breath in your lungs,
That's right.
you're a vessel. As long as you have breath in your lungs and you're willing, you can be a vessel God can use. And
And I can't. The scripture's not clear, but I remember going over that how, in this life, he talks about you'll have family. And I see that it's like we have grandchildren
Right.
that are not our natural grandchildren, but in this church we love them like
Oh yeah.
our grandchildren. And then some of the young adults are young enough to be our grandchildren.
well, you understand,
For sure.
you understand, both of you fully, the impact of adoption. And, we have been adopted and grafted into the kingdom of heaven. And so, I have to remind myself, even when I'm in a disagreement with somebody, and sometimes they can be, real disagreements, that if they've made a public confession of knowing the Lord, I'm not the one to judge them. And that we may be brothers for eternity. Like
Right.
what matters today just probably will not matter on the other side. And so there are a lot of people around us who, by the grace of God, will be doing life with us for eternity. And our goal is to help people be encouraged in that, so really, thank you guys.
Yeah. Thank you
we
for
really
coming and
appreciate
sharing
it.
your
Yeah.
stories.
We
your
love you
testimonies.
guys.
Yeah.
And I would encourage anybody listening, if they want to sit down with you and listen to more stories of God's faithfulness and goodness,
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
y'all have so many to share.
Ken and Cheryl are at church almost every week, and if you want to take the opportunity to connect with them, they would love to meet you. Just come and introduce yourself. If you are needing a grandparent in your life, don't hesitate. Miss Cheryl is an excellent cook, and if you don't mind making a drive, I'm sure they'd love to have you over for dinner. And we've been blessed every time we've been with them. So thank you guys for taking a moment to listen to their story. Remember that the enemy is defeated by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. And we're taking time to tell stories because these stories help ensure the enemy is defeated in our lives.